Unit 2, 3 amazing promises from Jeremiah to the people of God. At this point, where are we? Where are we in our timeline? Where are we in the overall storyline of what God is doing? Well, we are at a very low point. Judah is overtaken by Babylon. The temple, the palace are destroyed. They're laid to waste by Nebuchadnezzar, and the people have been deported out of the land that God had promised them into Babylon. And these are some of the darkest days of Judah's history. And you can see the reflection of that, the heart that they have. In fact, in Psalm 137, you read how they write this, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and we wept because we remembered Zion. We remembered the glorious days of Jerusalem. We hung our harps upon the willows in the midst of it. For there, those who carried us away captive asked of us a song, and those who plundered us requested a mirth. And they said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." But they responded, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? How can we celebrate when everything that we cherish and everything that we trusted in is decimated, is totally destroyed?" So you can see the heart of the people at this time. They were trusting in God to protect them because of the promises of the past, but things are destroyed. Everything that they trusted in is gone. And so things are bad at this point. People are depressed. They are deported. Things could not look any worse. And this is where Jeremiah steps in, because even though yet all of this bad stuff is going on, God has some amazing news that he wants to share with these people, with his people, through the prophet Jeremiah. And it starts in Jeremiah 29. So here at the beginning of Jeremiah 29, it says, "Now these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem to the remainder of the elders who were carried away captive, to the priests, to the prophets, and the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon." So this is obviously before Jerusalem is destroyed, but after the first and possibly the second captivity. So if I ask you this question, what is the context of Jeremiah 29? We know exactly what it is now. We've studied this. We know who Jeremiah is, when he ministered, and what was going on. And so this is either at the first deportation of the Jews out of Judah into Babylon, or it's the second. It's most likely the first, but it could be either. But we know that it's not the New Testament. It's not the Garden of Eden. It's not the king during the kingdoms of Israel. We know it's right here at the end of Judah. And so as we go on, verse 4, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all who were carried away captive," and he specifies, "whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon." So we know exactly who it is that Jeremiah is referring to. And here's the message that God gives him: "Build houses and dwell in them. Plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives, beget sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give daughters to your husbands." It's kind of an interesting thing. It's like he's saying, I want you to settle there for a while. "For thus says the Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are in your midst deceive you, nor listen to your dreams which you cause to be dreamed." Because at this time, we know that there were people who thought that the Babylonian captivity was going to be very short-lived. Jeremiah is stepping in and saying, don't listen to them. Here's what God has to say to you. "For thus says the Lord, after 70 years are completed at Babylon, I will visit I will visit you, and I will perform my good word towards you. And," look what he says, "I will cause you to return to this place." So he has a specific message specifically to this people. After 70 years, you're going to return. And then we have a very well-known verse, Jeremiah 29:11, that often gets quoted alone. "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." But this alone is out of context, but we know to properly understand this verse, we know to whom Jeremiah is referring to, don't we? Because he goes on and he says, "Then you will call upon me, and you will pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all of your heart." So here, Jeremiah is clearly speaking to the Jews who are in exile, who have probably given up on the promises of God. But he says, no, God has 3 specific promises for you. So the first one we see right here, promise number 1, and that is that they will return to the land. Despite the fact that they are out of the land, they will return. God promises them. Let's look at the second one. We see this a couple chapters back, Jeremiah 23. He says this, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord." Now, all of these are future promises from God through Jeremiah to the people who are now in exile. Here's what he says, that I will raise to David a branch of righteousness. A king shall reign and prosper and execute judgment and righteousness in the earth. In his days, this future king, Judah will be saved and Israel will dwell safely. Notice those details. Now, this is his name by which he will be called the Lord our righteousness. So he says there's going to be a king who's coming. He will reunite Israel and Judah, and he will be the Lord our righteousness. This is a massive promise. So the first promise that Jeremiah gives us is that they're going to return to the land. The second is that there is a king who will come to Israel, the reunited Israel, who is from the line of David. So now let's look at our third promise, and this is where we go to something that we've been looking forward to for many modules, and that is Jeremiah 31. We start in verse 31, where Jeremiah says this, another future promise. "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." Notice a reunited nation here. But look at the details. 32 says, "Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says the Lord." So he's contrasting this coming covenant against the Mosaic covenant. Now here's what he says. "But this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and I will write it on their hearts. I will be their God and they shall be my people. No more shall every man teach his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, says the Lord." And then he says this, "For I will forgive their iniquity and their sin I will remember no more." It's a key idea as part of this. And so what our third promise is, the first is that they're going to return to the land. The second is that there is a king, despite that they have no throne, no country right now. There is a king who is coming, who is going to reunite Israel from the line of David. And now we have this third promise, is that there is a new covenant that will be put in place, and that is going to replace the Mosaic covenant. So as we look at these three promises, just look at them for a sec. They're going to return to the land. There's a king who's going to come from the line of David, and that there's going to be this brand new covenant. Let me ask this. What are these promises? These are promises from Jeremiah, but what are they? Well, we know what these are. These are our covenants again. If you look at the first one. They're going to return to the land. What covenant is that? That's the Abrahamic covenant, isn't it? What about number 2? A king will come who is from the line of David. What covenant is that? Well, that's, of course, the Davidic covenant. And then you have the third promise, which says that one covenant is going to replace the other covenant. A new covenant is going to replace one that is no longer going to be relevant. And so if we go back to this slide that I had shown you a number of modules back, we kind of looked at the 4 covenants that we have, right? We have the Abrahamic covenant, which was that God would make a nation that would be a blessing to the world, right? The Mosaic covenant was a contract with that nation based on their obedience. We looked at at the Mosaic covenant earlier on. Then we have the Davidic covenant, which is there is going to be a kingdom through the line of David that would never end. So we have that promise as well, but we left this one off, this new covenant, this last covenant. And what is it? Well, now we know from Jeremiah. The new covenant is the final covenant, and it's going to replace the Mosaic covenant, but it's going to do better than that. It's going to offer complete and total forgiveness. And so now that we have these promises from Jeremiah, we are set to now have someone expand deeper into these promises. And who is that that's going to do that? But our friend Ezekiel. So in our next unit, we are going to take a look at Ezekiel and how he takes what Jeremiah gives us and expands on it. So join me in Unit 3 for Ezekiel, prophet of imminent destruction and future restoration.